Day and night and day, the living creatures give their praise. To him who lives eternally, they never cease from saying, Holy, holy is Yahweh Almighty, worthy, worthy to receive all glory.
Shalom, I am Leigh.
Shalom, I'm James.
And we are Between the River and the Ravens. We are so blessed that you are joining us as we start in on the second book of Maccabees. I want to just let you know that what we will be showing up on the screen for the scripture is the King James Version, because we do read from the Cepher, and you can't get the Cepher from eSword. So they're very similar. You may hear some different words that we use that are the actual Hebrew words versus the what has been transcribed into the English word versions in King James Version. If you are interested in a Cepher, you can go to www.cepher.net. So with that being said, we pray that this is a blessing to you, and we will begin with the first chapter of 2nd Maccabees.
Chapter 1. The brethren of Yahudim that be at Jerusalem and in the land of Yahud wish unto the brethren, the Yahudim, that are throughout Mitzrayim, health and peace. Elohim be gracious unto you, and remember his covenant that he made with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, his faithful servants, and give you all a heart to serve him and to do his will with a good courage and a willing mind. And open your hearts in his Torah and commandments, and send you peace. And hear your prayers, and be at one with you, and never forsake you in time of trouble. And now we be here praying for you. What time as Demetrius reigned in the 169th year, we the Yahudim wrote unto you in the extremity of trouble that came upon us in those years, from the time that Yacon and his company revolted from the Holy Land and kingdom, and burned the porch, and shed innocent blood. Then we pray unto yahuah, and were heard. We offered also sacrifices and fine flour, and lighted the lamps, and set forth the loaves. And now see that ye keep the feast of Hanukkah in the month of Kislev. In the 168th year, the people that were at Jerusalem and in Yehuda, and the council, and Yehuda sent greeting and health unto Aristobulus, King Ptolemy's master, who was of the stock of the anointed priest, and to the Yahudim that were in Mitzrayim. So much so as Elohim has delivered us from great perils, we thank him highly, as having been in battle against a king. For he cast them out that fought within the holy city. For when the leader was come into Persia, and the army with him that seemed invincible, they were slain in the temple of Naniah by the deceit of Naniah's priest. For Antiochus, as though he would marry her, came into the place, and his friends that were with him, to receive money in name of a dowry, which when the priest of Naniah had set forth, and he was entered with a small company into the compass of the temple, they shut the temple as soon as Antiochus was come in. And opening a privy door of the roof, they threw stones like thunderbolts, and struck down the captain, hewed them in pieces, smote off their heads, and cast them to those that were without. Blessed be our Elohim in all things, who has delivered up the wicked, Therefore, whereas we are now purposed to keep the purification of the temple upon the 25th day of the month Kislev, we thought it necessary to certify you thereof, that ye also might keep it as the feast of Hanukkah, and of fire, which was given us when Nehemiah offered sacrifice after he had built the temple and the altar. For when our fathers were led into Persia, the priests that were then devout took the fire of the altar privily and hid it in a hollow place of a pit without water, where they kept it sure, so that the place was unknown to all men. Now after many years, when it pleased Elohim, Nehemiah, being sent from the king of Persia, did send of the posterity of those priests that had hid it to the fire. But when they told us, they found no fire, but thick water. Then commanded he them to draw it up, and to bring it. And when the sacrifices were laid on, Nehemiah commanded the priests to sprinkle the wood and the things laid thereupon with the water. When this was done, and the time came that the sun shone, which afore was hid in the cloud, there was a great fire kindled, so that every man marveled. And the priest made a prayer while the sacrifice was consuming. I say, both the priest and all the rest, Jonathan beginning, and the rest answering thereunto, as Nehemiah did. And the prayer was after this manner: O yahuah, yahuah Elohim, creator of all things, who is fearful and strong, and righteous and merciful, and the only and gracious King, the only giver of all things, the only just, almighty, and everlasting, you that deliver Yasharel from all trouble, and did choose the fathers and sanctify them. Receive the sacrifice for your whole people, Yasharel, and guard your own portion, and sanctify it. Gather those together that are scattered from us, deliver them that serve among the heathen. Look upon them that are despised and abhorred, and let the heathen know that you are our Elohim. Punish them that oppress you, and with pride do us wrong. Plant your people again in your holy place, as Moshe has spoken. And the priests sung psalms of thanksgiving. Now when the sacrifice was consumed, Nehemiah commanded the water that was left to be poured on the great stones. When this was done, there was kindled a flame, but it was consumed by the light that shined from the altar. So when this matter was known, it was told the king of Persia that in the place where the priests that were led away had hid the fire, there appeared water, and that Nehemiah had purified the sacrifices therewith. Then the king, enclosing the place, made it holy, after he had tried the matter. And the king took many gifts, and bestowed thereof on those whom he would gratify. And Nehemiah called this thing Naphar, which is as much to say a cleansing, but many men call it Nephu.
Chapter 2. It is also found in the records that Yirmiyahu the prophet commanded them that were carried away to take the fire, as it has been signified, and how that the prophet, having given them the Torah, charged them not to forget the commandments of Yahweh, and that they should not err in their minds when they see images of silver and gold with their ornaments, and with other such speeches exhorted he them that the Torah should not depart from their hearts. It was also contained in the same writing that the prophet, being warned of Elohim, commanded the tabernacle and the ark to go with him as he went forth into the mountain, where Moshe climbed up and saw the heritage of Elohim. And when Yirmiyahu came thither, he found a hollow cave, wherein he laid the tabernacle and the ark, and the altar of incense, and so stopped the door. And some of those that followed him came to mark the way, but they could not find it, which when Yirmiyahu perceived, he blamed them, saying, As for that place, it shall be unknown until the time that Elohim gather his people again together and receive them unto mercy. Then shall Yahweh show them these things, and the glory of Yahweh shall appear, and the cloud also, as it was showed under Moshe. And as when Shalom desired that the place might be honorably sanctified, it was also declared that he, being wise, offered the sacrifice of dedication and of the finishing of the temple. And as when Moshe prayed unto Yahweh, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the sacrifices, even so prayed Shalom also, and the fire came down from heaven and consumed the ascending smoke offerings. And Moshe said, because the sin offering was not to be eaten, it was consumed. So Shalom kept those 8 days. The same things also were reported in the writings and the commentaries of Nehemiah, and how he, founding a library, gathered together the acts of the kings and the prophets and of David, and the Sepharim of the kings concerning the holy gifts. In like manner also, Yehudah gathered together all those things that were lost by the reason of war we had, and they remain with us. Wherefore, if ye have need thereof, send some to fetch them unto you. Whereas we then are about to celebrate the purification, we have written unto you, and ye shall do well if ye keep the same days. We hope also that the Elohim that delivered all his people and gave them all a heritage, and the kingdom, and the priesthood, and the sanctuary, as he promised in the Torah, will shortly have mercy upon us, and gather us together out of every land under heaven into the holy place. For he has delivered us out of great troubles, and has purified the place. Now as concerning Yehudah Maccabee, and his brethren, and the purification of the great temple, and the dedication of the altar, and the wars against Antiochus Epiphanes, and Jupiter his son, and the manifest signs that came from heaven unto those that behaved themselves manfully to their honor for Yehudaism, so that being but a few, they overcame the whole country and chased barbarous multitudes, and recovered again the temple, renowned all the world over, and freed the city, and upheld the Torah, which were going down. Yahweh being gracious unto them with all favor. All these things I say, being declared by Yacon of Cyrene and 5 Sepharim, we will essay to abridge in 1 volume. For considering the infinite number and the difficulty which they find the desire to look into the narrations of the story, for the variety of the matter, we have been careful that they that will read may have delight, and that they that are desirous to commit to memory might have ease, and that all into whose hands it comes might have profit. Therefore to us that have taken upon us this painful labor of abridging, it was not easy, but a matter of sweat and watching, even as it is no ease unto him that prepares a banquet and seeks the benefit of others. Yet for the pleasuring of many we will undertake gladly these great pains, leaving to the author the exact handling of every particular, and laboring to follow the rules of an abridgment. For as the master builder of a new house must care for the whole building, but he that undertakes to set it out and paint it must seek out fit things for the adorning thereof. Even so I think it was with us. to stand upon every point and go over things at large, and to be curious in particulars, belongs to the first author of the story. But to use brevity and avoid much laboring of the work is to be granted to him that will make an abridgment. Here then will we begin the story, only adding thus much to that which has been said, that it is foolish thing to make a long prologue and to be short in the story itself.
Chapter 3. Now when the holy city was inhabited with all peace, and the Torah was kept very well, because of the holiness of Yahuah, the high priest, and his hatred of wickedness, it came to pass that even the kings themselves did honor the place, and magnify the temple with their best gifts. So much so that Seleucus of Asia of his own revenues bore all the cost belonging to the service of the sacrifices. But one Shimon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city. And when he could not overcome Yahuah, he got him to Apollonius, the son of Thraces, who then was governor of Silo Aram and Phoenicia, and told him that the treasury in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifices, was innumerable, and that it was possible to bring all into the king's hand. Now when Apollonius came to the king, and had showed him of the money whereof he was told, the king chose out of Heliodorus his treasurer, and sent him with a commandment to bring him the foresaid money. So forthwith Heliodorus took his journey, under a color of visiting the cities of Silo Aram and Phoenicia, but indeed to fulfill the king's purpose. And when he was come to Jerusalem, and had been courteously received of the high priest of the city, he told him what intelligence was given of the money, and declared wherefore he came, and asked if these things were so indeed. Then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children, and that some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobiyahu, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Shimon had misinformed, the sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold, and that it was altogether impossible that such wrongs should be done unto them that had committed it to the holiness of the place, and to the majesty and inviolable sanctity of the temple, honored over the world. But Heliodorus, because of the king's commandment given him, said that in any wise it must be brought into the king's treasury. So at the day which he appointed, he entered in to order this manner, wherefore there was no small agony throughout the whole city. But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their priest vestments, called unto heaven upon him that made a torah concerning things given to be kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept. Then whoso had looked the high priest in the face, it would have wounded his heart, for his countenance and the changing of his color declared the inward agony of his mind. For the man who was compassed with fear and horror of the body, that it was manifest to them that looked upon him, what sorrow he had now in his heart. Others ran flocking out of their houses to the general supplication, because the place was like to come into contempt. And the women girt with their sackcloth under their breasts abounded in the streets, and the virgins that were kept in ran, some to the gates and some to the walls, and others looked out of the windows. And all, holding their hands towards heaven, made supplication. Then it would have pitied a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts, and the fear of the high priest being in such an agony. They then called upon El Shaddai, yahuah, to keep the things committed of trust safe and sure for those that had committed them. Nevertheless, Heliodorus executed that which was decreed. Now, as he was there present himself with his guard about the treasury, yahuah Sebaoth and the prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that were presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of Elohim, and fainted, and were sore afraid. For there appeared unto them a horse with a terrible rider upon him, and adorned with a very fair covering, and he ran for it fiercely, and smote at Heliodorus with his 4 feet, and it seemed that he had sat upon the horse, had complete harness of gold. Moreover, 2 other young men appeared before him, notable in strength, excellent in beauty, and comely in apparel, who stood by him on either side, and scourged him continually, and gave him many sore stripes. And Heliodorus fell suddenly unto the ground, and was compassed with great darkness. But they that were with him took him up, and put him into a litter. Thus him that lately came with a great train, and with all his guard into the said treasury, they carried out, being unable to help himself with his weapons, and manifestly they acknowledged the power of Elohim. For he by the hand of Elohim was cast down, and lay speechless without all hope of life. But they praised yahuah, that had miraculously honored his own place, for the temple, which a little afore was full of fear and trouble, when El Shaddai yahuah appeared, was filled with joy and gladness. Then straightway certain of Heliodorus' friends prayed on Yahu, that he would call upon El Elyon to grant him his life, who lay ready to give up the Ruach. So the high priest, suspecting lest the king should misconceive that some treachery had been done to Heliodorus by the Yahudim, offered a sacrifice for the health of the man. Now as the high priest was making an atonement, the same young men in the same clothing appeared and stood beside Heliodorus, saying, Give on Yahu the high priest great thanks, so much so as for his sake yahuah has granted you life. And seeing that you have been scourged from heaven, declare unto all men the mighty power of Elohim. And when they had spoken these words, they appeared no more. So Heliodorus, after he had offered sacrifice unto yahuah, and made great vows unto him that had saved his life, and saluted on Yahu, returned with his host to the king. Then testified he to all men the works of the great Elohim, which he had seen with his eyes. And when the king saw Heliodorus, who might be a fit man to be sent yet once again to Jerusalem, he said, If you have any enemy or traitor, send him hither, and you shall receive him well scourged. If he escape with his life, for in that place, no doubt, there is an especial power of Elohim. For he that dwells in heaven has his eye on that place, and defends it, and he beats and destroys them that come to hurt it. And the things concerning Heliodorus, in the keeping of the treasury, fell out on this sort.
Chapter 4. This Shimon now, of whom we spoke afore, having been a betrayer of the money and of his country, slandered Onyahu, as if he had terrified Heliodorus, and been the worker of these evils. Thus was he bold to call him a traitor, that had deserved well of the city, and tendered his own nation, and was so zealous of the Torah. But when their hatred went so far that by one of Shimon's faction murders were committed, Onyahu, seeing the danger of this contention, and that Apollonius, as being the governor of Silo Aram and Phoenicia, did rage and increase Shimon's malice. He went to the king, not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. For he saw that it was impossible that the state should continue quiet, and Shimon leave his folly, unless the king did look thereunto. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus, called Epiphanes, took the kingdom, Jachin, the brother of Onyahu, labored underhand to be a high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and another revenue 80 talents. Beside this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set up a place for exercise and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians. Which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to yhvh fashion, and the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Yahudim by means of Yochanan, the father of Eupolemus, who went ambassador to Rome for amity and aid. He took away and putting down the governments which were according to the Torah, he brought up new customs against the Torah. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of yhvh fashions, and increase of heathenish manners, through the exceeding profaneness of Jachin, that wicked wretch and no high priest, that the priests had no courage to serve any more at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hastened to be partakers of the torahless allowance in the place of exercise, after the game of discus called them forth, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Yavanim best of all, by reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, for they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all ways. For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the Torah of Elohim, but the time following shall declare these things. Now when the game that was used every 4th year was kept at Sor, the king being present, this ungracious Jachin sent special messengers from Jerusalem, who were Antiochians, to carry 300 drachmas of silver to the sacrifice of Hercules, which even the bearers thereof thought fit not to bestow upon the sacrifice, because it was not convenient, but to be reserved for other charges. This money then, in regard of the sender, was appointed to Hercules' sacrifice, but because of the bearers thereof, it was employed to the making of galleys. Now when Apollonius, the son of Menestheus, was sent into Mitzrayim for the coronation of King Ptolemy, Philometor, Antiochus, understanding him not to be well affected to his affairs, provided for his own safety, whereupon he came to Yahweh, and from thence to Jerusalem, where he was honorably received of Jachin and of the city, and was brought in with torch alight, and with great shoutings, and so afterward went with his host unto Phoenicia. 3 years afterward, Jachin sent Menelaus, the aforesaid Shimon's brother, to bear the money unto the king, and to put him in mind of certain necessary matters. For he being brought to the presence of the king, when he had magnified him for the glorious appearance of his power, got the priesthood to himself, offering more than Jachin by 300 talents of silver. So he came with the king's mandate, bringing nothing worthy of the high priesthood, but having the fury of a cruel tyrant and the rage of a savage beast. Then Yacon, who had undermined his own brother, being undermined by another, was compelled to flee into the country of Ammonim. So Menelaus got the principality. But as for the money that he had promised unto the king, he took no good order for it, albeit Sostratus, the ruler of the castle, required it. For unto him appertained the gathering of the customs. Wherefore they were both called before the king. Now Menelaus left his brother Lysimachus in his stead in the priesthood, and Sostratus left Crates, who was governor of the Cyprians. While those things were in doing, they of Tarsus and Malus made insurrection, because they were given the king's concubine called Antiochus. Then came the king in all haste to appease matters, leaving Andronicus, a man in authority, for his deputy. Now Menelaus, supposing that he had gotten a convenient time, stole certain vessels of gold out of the temple and gave some of them to Andronicus, and some he sold into Sor in the cities round about, which when Onyahu knew of surety, he reproved him and withdrew himself into his sanctuary at Daphne that lies by Antioch. Wherefore Menelaus, taking Andronicus apart, prayed him to get Onyahu into his hands, who being persuaded thereunto, and coming to Onyahu in deceit, gave him his right hand with oaths. And though he were suspected by him, yet persuaded he him to come forth to the sanctuary, whom forthwith he shut up with regard of justice. For which cause not only the Yahudim, but many also of other nations took great indignation, and were much grieved for the unjust murder of the man. And when the king was come again from the places about Cilicia, the Yahudim that were in the city, and certain of the Yavanim that abhorred the fact also, complained because Onyahu was slain without cause. Therefore Antiochus was heartily sorry, and moved to pity, and wept because of the sober and modest behavior of him that was dead. And being kindled with anger, forthwith he took away Andronicus his purple, and rent off his clothes, and leading him through the whole city unto the very place where he committed impiety against Onyahu, there slew he the accused murderer. Thus Yahweh rewarded him his punishment as he had deserved. Now when the sacrileges had been committed in the city by Lysimachus with the consent of Menelaus, the fruit thereof was spread abroad, and the multitude gathered themselves together against Lysimachus, many vessels of gold being already carried away. Whereupon the common people rising and being filled with rage, Lysimachus armed about 3,000 men, and began first to offer violence. One Aranus being the leader, a man far gone in years, and no less in folly. They then, seeing the attempt of Lysimachus, some of them caught stones, some clubs, other taking handfuls of dust that was next at hand, cast them all together upon Lysimachus and those that sat upon them. Thus many of them they wounded, and some they struck to the ground, and all of them they forced to flee. But as for the temple robber himself, him they killed beside the treasury. And of these matters, therefore, there was an accusation laid against Menelaus. Now when the king came to Zor, 3 men that were sent from the Senate pleaded the cause before him, But Menelaus, being now convicted, promised Ptolemy, the son of Dorymenes, to give him much money if he would pacify the king toward him. Whereupon Ptolemy, taking the king aside into a certain gallery, as it were to take the air, brought him to be of another mind. So much so that he discharged Menelaus from the accusations, who, notwithstanding, was cause of all the mischief, and those poor men who, if they had told their cause, yea, before the Scythians, should have been judged innocent, them he condemned to death. Thus they that followed the matter for the city and for the people and for the holy vessels did soon suffer unjust punishment. Wherefore even they of Zor, moved with hatred of that wicked deed, caused them to be honorably buried. And so, through the covetousness of them that were of power, Menelaus remained still in authority, increasing in malice, and being a great traitor to the citizens.
Chapter 5. About the same time Antiochus prepared his second voyage into Mitzrayim. And then it happened that through all the city, for the space almost of 40 days, there were seen horsemen running in the air, in cloth of gold and armed with lances, like a band of soldiers, and troops of horsemen in array, encountering and running one against another, with shaking of shields and multitude of pikes, and drawing of swords, and casting of spears, and glittering of golden ornaments, and harness of all sorts. Wherefore every man prayed that that apparition might turn to good. Now when there was gone forth a false rumor, as though Antiochus had been dead, Yacon took at the least 1,000 men, and suddenly made an assault upon the city, and they that were upon the walls being put back, and the city at length taken, Menelaus fled into the castle. But Yacon slew his own citizens without mercy, not considering that to get the day of them of his own nation would be a most unhappy day for him. But thinking they had been his enemies and not his countrymen whom he conquered, howbeit for all this he obtained not the principality, but at the last received shame for the reward of his treason, and fled again into the country of the Amorim. In the end, therefore, he had an unhappy return, being accused before Ertas, the king of the Amorim, fleeing from city to city, pursued of all men, hated as a forsaker of the Torah, and being had in abomination as an open enemy of his country and countrymen, he was cast out of Mitzrayim. Thus he that had driven many out of his country perished in a strange land, retiring to the Lacedaemonians, and thinking there to find help by reason of his kindred. And he that had cast out many unburied had none to mourn for him, nor any solemn funerals at all, nor sepulchre with his fathers. Now when this that was done came to the king's ear, he thought that Yahudah had revolted, whereupon removing out of Mitzrayim in a furious mind, he took the city by force of arms, and commanded his men of war not to spare such as they met, and to slay such as went up upon the houses. Thus there was killing of young and old, making away of men, women, and children, slaying of the virgins and infants. And there were destroyed within the space of 3 whole days 80,000, whereof 40,000 were slain in the conflict, and no fewer sold than slain. Yet was he not content with this, but presumed to go into the most holy temple of all the world, Menelaus, that traitor to the Torah and to his own country, being his guide, and taking the holy vessels with polluted hands and with profane hands, pulling down the things that were dedicated by other kings to the augmentation and glory and honor of the place, he gave them away. And so haughty was Antiochus in mind that he considered not that yahuah was angry for a while for the sins of them that dwelt in the city, and therefore his eye was not upon the place. For had they not been formerly wrapped in many sins, this man, as soon as he had come, had forthwith been scourged and put back from his presumption, as Heliodorus was, when Seleucus the king sent to view the treasury. Nevertheless, Elohim did not choose the people for the place's sake, but the place for the people's sake. And therefore the place itself that was partaker with them of the adversary was that happened to the nation, did afterward communicate in the benefits sent from yahuah. And as it was forsaken in the wrath of El Shaddai, so again the great yahuah, being reconciled, it was set up with all glory. So when Antiochus had carried out of the temple 1,800 talents, he departed in all haste unto Antioch, weening in his pride to make the land navigable and the sea passable by foot. Such was the haughtiness of his mind. And he left governors to vex the nation. At Jerusalem, Philip, for his country of Paphlagon, and for manners more barbarous than he that set him there. And at Gizrim, Antiochus, and besides Menelaus, who wore worse than all the rest, bore a heavy hand over the citizens, having a malice mind against his countrymen, the Yahudim. He sent also the detestable ringleader Apollonius with an army of 22,000, commanding him to slay all those that were in their best age, and to sell the women and the younger sort, who coming to Jerusalem and pretending peace did forbear till the holy day of the Shabbat, when taking the Yahudim keeping holy day, he commanded his men to arm themselves. And so he slew all them that were gone to the celebrating of the Shabbat, and running through the city with weapons slew great multitudes. But Yehuda Maccabee, with 9 others, or thereabout, withdrew himself into the wilderness, and lived in the mountains after the manner of beasts, with his company, who fed on herbs continually, lest they should be partakers of the pollution.
Chapter 6. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Yahudim to depart from the Torah of their fathers, and not to live after the Torah of Elohim, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and that in Gerizim of Jupiter the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in that place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the other nations, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women without the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were against the Torah. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the Torah forbids. Neither was it lawful for a man to guard days of Shabbat or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Yehudi. And in the day of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Yahudim were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus, carrying ivy. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Yahudim, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. And whoso would not conform to themselves to the manner of the other nations should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. For there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, whom when they had openly led round about the city, the babes hanging at their breasts, they cast them down headlong from the wall. And others that had run together into caves nearby to guard the Shabbat, secretly, being discovered by Philip, were all burnt together, because they had made a conscience to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. Now I beseech those that read these Cepher, that they be not discouraged for these calamities, but that they judge those punishments not to be for destruction, but for the chastening of our nation. For it is a sign of his great goodness when wicked doers are not suffered any long time, but forthwith punished. For not as with other nations, whom yahuah patiently forbears to punish till they have come to the fullness of their sins, so deals he with us, lest that being come to the height of sin, afterwards he should take vengeance of us. And therefore he never withdraws his mercy from us. And though he punishes with adversity, yet he never forsakes his people. But let this be spoken now for a warning unto us. And now will we come to the declaring of the matter in a few words. Eleazar, one of the principal scribes, an aged man and of well-favored countenance, was constrained to open his mouth and to eat swine's flesh. But he, choosing rather to die gloriously than to live stained with such an abomination, spit it forth, and came of his own accord to the torment, as it behooved them to come, that are resolute to stand out against such things, as are against the Torah, for love of life to be tasted. But they that had the charge of that wicked feast, for the old acquaintance they had with a man, taking him aside, besought him to bring flesh of his own provision, such as was lawful for him to use, and make as if he did eat the flesh taken from the sacrifice commanded by the king, that in doing so he might be delivered from death, and for the old friendship with them find favor. But he began to consider discreetly, and as became his age, and the excellency of his ancient years, and the honor of his gray head, whereon was come, and his most honest education from a child, or rather the holy Torah, made and given by Elohim. Therefore he answered accordingly, and willed them straightways to send him to Sheol. For it becomes not our age, said he, in any wise to dissemble, whereby many young persons might think that Eleazar, being 80 years old and 10, were now gone to a strange religion. And so they, through my hypocrisy and desire to live a little time and a moment longer, should be deceived by me, and I get a stain to my old age and make it abominable. For though for the present time I should be delivered from the punishment of men, yet should I not escape the hand of El Shaddai, neither alive nor dead. Wherefore now, manfully changing this life, I will show myself such one as my age requires, and leave a notable example to such as be young to die willingly and courageously for the honorable and holy Torah. And when he had said these words, immediately he went to the torment. They that led him, changing the goodwill they bore him a little before into hatred, because the foresaid speeches proceeded, as they thought, from a desperate mind. But when he was ready to die with stripes, he groaned and said, It is manifest unto yahuah that has the holy knowledge that whereas I might have been delivered from death, I now endure sore pains in body by being beaten, but in soul am well content to suffer these things because I fear him. And thus this man died, leaving his death for an example of a noble courage and a memorial of virtue, not only unto young men, but unto all his nation.
Chapter 7. It came to pass also that 7 brethren with their mother were taken and compelled by the king against the Torah to taste swine's flesh, and were tormented with scourges and whips. But one of them that spoke first said thus, What would you ask or learn of us? We are ready to die, rather than to transgress the Torah of our fathers. Then the king, being in a rage, commanded pans and cauldrons to be made hot, which forthwith being heated, he commanded to cut out the tongue of him that spoke first, and to cut off the utmost parts of his body, the rest of his brethren and his mother looking on. Now when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire, and to be fried in the pan. And as the vapor of the pan was for a good space dispersed, they exhorted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus, Yahuah Elohim looks upon us, and in truth has comfort in us, as Moshe in his song, which witnessed to their faces, declared, saying, And he shall be comforted in his servants. So when the first was dead after this number, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off the skin of his head with the hair, they asked him, Will you eat before you be punished throughout every member of your body? But he answered in his own language and said, No. Wherefore he also received the next torment in order as the former did. And when he was at the last gasp, he said, You, like a fury, take us out of this present life, but the King of the world shall rise us up, who have died for his Torah unto everlasting life. After him was the third made a mocking stock, and when he was required, he put out his tongue, and that right soon, holding forth his hands manfully, and said courageously, These I had from heaven, and for his Torah I despised them, and from him I hope to receive them again. So much so that the king and they that were with him marveled at the young man's courage, for that he nothing regarded the pains. Now when this man was dead also, they tormented and mangled the fourth in like manner. So when he was ready to die, he said thus, It is good, being put to death by men, to look for hope from Elohim, to be raised up again by him. As for you, you shall have no resurrection to life. Afterward they brought the fifth also, and mangled him. Then looked he unto the king, and said, You have power over men, you are corruptible, you do what you will. Yet think not that our nation is forsaken of Elohim, but abide a while, and behold his great power, how he will torment you and your seed. After him also they brought the sixth, who being ready to die said, Be not deceived without cause, for we suffer these things for ourselves, having sinned against our Elohim. Therefore marvelous things are done unto us. But think not that take in hand to strive against Elohim, that you shall escape unpunished. But the mother was marvelous above all, and worthy of honorable memory. For when she saw her 7 sons slain within the space of one day, she bore it with a good courage, because of the hope that she had in Yahuah. Yea, she exhorted every one of them in her own language, filled with courageous rukoth, and stirring up her womanness thoughts with a manly stomach, she said unto them, I cannot tell how ye came into my womb, for I neither gave you breath nor life, neither was it that formed the members of every one of you, but doubtless the Creator of the world, who formed the generations of man and found out the beginning of all things, will also of his own mercy give you breath and life again, as ye now regard not your own selves for his Torah's sake. Now Antiochus, thinking himself despised and suspecting it to be a reproachful speech, while the youngest was yet alive, did not only exhort him by words, but also assured him with oaths that he would make him both a rich and a happy man if he would turn from the Torah of his fathers, and that also he would take him for his friend and trust him with affairs. But when the young man would in no case hearken unto him, the king called his mother and exhorted her that she would counsel the young man to save his life. And when he had exhorted her with many words, she promised him that she would counsel her son. But she, bowing herself toward him, laughing the cruel tyrant to scorn, spoke in her country language on this manner, O my son, have pity upon me that bore you 9 months in my womb, and gave you such 3 years, and nourished you, and brought you up unto this age, and endured the troubles of education. I beseech you, my son, look upon the heavens and the earth, and all that is therein, and consider that Elohim made them of things that were not, and so was mankind made likewise. Fear not this tormentor, but being worthy of your brethren, take your death, that I may receive you again in mercy with your brethren. While she was yet speaking these words, the young man said, Whom wait ye for? I will not obey the king's commandment, but I will obey the commandment of the Torah that was given unto our fathers by Moshe. And you that have been the author of all mischief against the Ivrim shall not escape the hands of Elohim, for we suffer because of our sins. And though the living yahuah be angry with us a little while for our chastening and correction, yet shall he be at one again with his servants. But you, O godless man, and of all other most wicked, be not lifted up without a cause, nor puffed up with uncertain hopes, lifting up your hand against the servants of Elohim. For you have not yet escaped the judgment of El Shaddai, who sees all things. For our brethren who now have suffered a short pain are dead under Elohim's covenant of everlasting life, but you, through the judgment of Elohim, shall receive just punishment for your pride. But I, as my brethren, offer up my body and life for the Torah of our fathers, beseeching Elohim that he would speedily be merciful unto our nation, and that you, by torments and plagues, may confess that he alone is Elohim, and that in me and my brethren the wrath of El Shaddai, which is justly brought upon our nation, may cease. Then the king, being in a rage, handed him worse than all the rest, and took it grievously that he was mocked. So this man died undefiled, and put his whole trust in yahuah. Last of all, after the sons, the mother died. Let this be enough now to have spoken concerning the idolatrous feast and the extreme tortures.
Chapter 8. Then Yehuda Maccabee and they that were with him went privily into the towns, and called their kinsfolk together, and took unto them all such as continued in the Yahudim's faith, and assembled about 6,000 men. And they called upon Yahweh that he would look upon the people that was trodden down of all, and also pity the temple profaned of wicked men, and that he would have compassion upon the city, sore defaced and ready to be made even with the ground, and hear the blood that cried unto him, and remember the wicked slaughter of harmless infants and the blasphemies committed against his name, and that he would show his hatred against the wicked. Now when yahuah Maccabee had his company, Yehudah Maccabee had his company about him, he could not be withstood by the heathen, for the wrath of Yahweh was turned into mercy. Therefore he came at unawares and burnt up towns and cities, and got into his hands the most commodious places, and overcame and put to flight no small number of his enemies. But specially he took advantage of the night for such privy attempts, so much so that the fruit of his holiness was spread everywhere. So when Philip saw that this man increased by little and little, and that things prospered with him still more and more, he wrote unto Ptolemy, the governor of Silo, Aram, and Phoenicia, to yield more aid to the king's affairs. Then forthwith, choosing Nicanor, the son of Patroclus, one of his special friends, he sent him with no fewer than 20,000 of all nations under him, to root out the whole generation of the Yahudim. And with him he joined also Gorgias, a captain, who in matters of war had great experience. So Nicanor undertook to make so much money of the captive Yahudim as should defray the tribute of 2,000 talents, which the king was to pay to the Romaim. Wherefore immediately he sent to the cities upon the seacoast, proclaiming a sale of the captivity of the captive Yahudim, and promising that they should have 80 bodies for 1 talent, not expecting the vengeance that was to follow upon him from El Shaddai. Now when word was brought unto Yehudah of Nicanor's coming, and he had imparted unto those that were with him that the army was at hand, they that were fearful and distrusted the justice of Elohim fled and conveyed themselves away. Others sold all that they had left, and withal besought Yahweh to deliver them from being sold by the wicked Nicanor before they met together. And if not for their own sakes, yet for the covenants he had made with their fathers, and for his holy and glorious name's sake, by which they were called. So Yehudah Maccabee called his men together unto the number of 6,000, and exhorted them not to be stricken with terror of the enemy, nor to fear the great multitude of the heathen who came wrongfully against them, but to fight manfully, and to set before their eyes the injury that they had unjustly done to the holy place, and the cruel handling of the city, whereof they made a mockery, and also the taking away of the government of their forefathers. For they, said he, trust in their weapons and boldness, but our confidence is in El Shaddai, who at a beck can cast down both them that come against us and also all the world. Moreover, he recounted unto them what helps their forefathers had found, and how they were delivered when under Cancheriv 185,000 perished. And he told them of the battle that they had in Babel with the Galatim, how they came but 8,000 in all to the business, with 4,000 Macedonians, and that the Macedonians, being perplexed, the 8,000 destroyed 120,000 because of the help that they had from heaven, and so received a great booty. Thus, when he had made them bold with these words, and ready to die for the Torah and the country, he divided his army into 4 parts, and joined with himself his own brethren, leaders of each band, to wit, Shimon and Joseph and Jonathan, giving each one 1,500 men. He appointed Eleazar to read the holy Cepher. And when he had given them this watchword, the help of Elohim himself leading the first band. And by the help of El Shaddai, they slew above 9,000 of their enemies and wounded and maimed the most part of Nisanar's host, and so put all to flight, and took their money that came to buy them, and pursued them far, but lacking time they returned. For it was the day before the Sabbath, and therefore they would no longer pursue them. So when they had gathered their armor together and spoiled their enemies, they occupied themselves about the Shabbat, yielding exceeding praise and thanks to Yahweh, who had preserved them unto that day, which was the beginning of mercy, distilling upon them. And after the Shabbat, when they had given part of the spoils to the maimed and the widows and the orphans, the remnant they divided among themselves and their servants. When this was done, and they had made a common supplication, they besought the merciful Yahweh to be reconciled with his servants forever. Moreover, of those that were with Timotheus and Bachides, who fought against them, they slew above 20,000, and very easily got high and strong holds, and divided among themselves many spoils more, and made the maimed, orphans, widows, yea, and the aged also equal in spoils with themselves. And when they had gathered their armor together, they laid them up all carefully in convenient places, and the remnant of the spoils they brought to Jerusalem. They slew also Philarchus, that wicked person who was with Timotheus, and had annoyed the Yahudim many ways. Furthermore, at such time as they kept the feast for the victory in their country, they burnt Callisthenes, that had set fire upon the holy gates, who had fled into a little house, and so he received a reward meet for his wickedness. As for that most ungracious Nicanor, who had brought 1,000 merchants to buy the Yahudim, he was thrown the help of Yahweh, brought down by them, of whom he made last account, and putting off his glorious apparel and discharging his company, he came like a fugitive servant through the midland unto Antioch, having very great dishonor, for that his host was destroyed. Thus he that took upon him to make good to the Romaim their tribute by means of captives in Jerusalem told abroad that the Yahudim had Elohim to fight for them, and therefore they could not be hurt, because they followed the Torah that he gave them.
All right, that concludes the first part of the second book of Maccabees. We will return and finish up, and we just hope that this message is blessing you, that you are enjoying the word, and that you really gain some strength from the stories that we're reading. Such powerful stand that they made for the word, the perfect word.
Amen.
And there is blessing in that.
There is.
Shalom, everyone. Have a blessed evening.
Shalom.
Day and night and night and day, the living creatures give their praise to him who